But something has changed and something is different currently. And that is that 4 key shifts are emerging that make this the right moment, I believe, for a new strategic approach for the World Bank Group. First, agriculture itself is increasingly vulnerable to climate risks and a significant contributor to emissions. Yet, it only receives 4% of climate finance globally. So there is clearly an opportunity to tap into these resources to advance climate-smart agriculture, which I think would grow productivity while reducing emissions. Second, new tools have come to light for de-risking, which are opening doors for the private capital to flow into the agricultural sector. We've seen credit guarantees, first loss facilities, and insurance instruments to help make lending safe and more commercially viable for the private sector. These financial tools, when you pair them with public sector policy and regulatory reforms, then you can create a favorable environment for the private investor. Third, in the past, reaching individual farmers had been quite challenging. And frankly, even for fintechs and commercial banks, it was a challenge. Advancements in digitization and new digital tools have created opportunities to aggregate farmers, to connect them with buyers, with financial services, and with innovative technologies that enhance productivity. I have personal experience of this from my prior career. I know that these tools help to create a digital footprint. They help farmers to establish a credit history. They help them to gain access to getting these financial services at a much lower cost, sometimes as much lowered as 90% of what it would have been if they didn't have those histories. Fourth, a significant portion of agribusiness financing is sourced from large food companies and from traders who often operate in isolation. And this obviously creates inefficiencies, it creates fragmentation, but most importantly, it leaves small farmers out from the benefit of this activity. But we found that with these farmer organizations, what in the old days we used to call cooperatives, and producer organizations, we can move beyond the challenges of the past. These 4 emerging shifts have the potential to fundamentally shape and reshape the agribusiness landscape. I think they come at a time of extraordinary opportunity as global food demand is set to increase, as Jürgen reminds me, between 50 and 60% in the coming decades. But taking advantage of this approach will not happen without changing how we do things. So for us, that change begins today with a goal to create a comprehensive ecosystem for agribusiness, bringing all parts of the World Bank Group together to work as one unit. That strategic pivot is made possible because of the work done over the past 16 months by the people in this institution to become a better, simpler, more coordinated institution in itself. It moves us beyond fragmented efforts to what I call a constellation of solutions that includes everything from warehousing to logistics to production, but with smallholder farmers and producer organizations at the center, at the core, as the foundation. We are combining a new way of working with a new level of investment, doubling our agri-finance and agri-business commitments across the group to $9 billion annually by 2030. With IBRD and IDA's experience building capacity and services of the public sector, with IFC and MEGA being the financing experts and the private sector access that they provide, we think we can make changes that will be seen and felt by business and by government partners alike, with a goal to increase mobilization from the private sector in addition to the $9 billion that we put in as a group by 2030 to increase mobilization to another $5 billion by 2030. So, for example, our public sector arms can help countries develop regulations and standards like those that ensure that products comply with export market requirements. They can advise on land tenure solutions. They can advise on developing national irrigation networks. In the area of climate finance, they can help governments repurpose some of the $1.25 trillion of fossil fuel agriculture and fishery subsidies to incentivize greener practices, and I think that will unlock a significant source of financing for the agricultural sector. While our private sector teams can focus on everything from debt and equity funding to mitigating risk with guarantees. That's how the two groups come together. Now, these guarantees have always been a challenge, these whole issue of mitigating risk, because producers haven't always been able to access our fragmented de-risking instruments. We're now moving towards an integrated approach. We've brought these resources together under the World Bank Group Guarantee Platform that's run by MEGA. It's a key step and a key part of this. It makes it possible to deliver tailored solutions that meet the diverse demands of our partners. But I think where I see the greatest potential is by integrating the link between our public sector work and our private sector support to help smallholder farmers connect into the supply chain. IBRD has expertise in working closely with smallholder and producer organizations to improve their productivity, to improve their climate resilience, to make them viable suppliers that can meet the scale, the consistency, and the high standards that larger companies and a number of geographies need from the produce. Once established, ISC can step in not only to provide financing for equipment and the like, but also to connect those very producer organizations, those farmer organizations, those cooperatives with companies that seek reliable sources of quality produce. The key bottleneck to be addressed will differ across countries. It will differ from value chain to value chain. We cannot predetermine these interventions universally. That would be a mistake, because every country will have a certain set of barriers to be overcome. But with a World Bank Group ecosystem approach, I think we can identify and help to annul any number of barriers to build the opportunity. The reality is the effort to transform agribusiness is not only about the food demand that Jürgen was talking to me about. I think it is fundamentally an initiative to develop jobs for people. In the next 10 years, 1.2 billion young people in developing countries will enter the workforce. Yet currently forecasts are that only 420 million jobs are projected to be available in those countries. That leaves nearly 800 million people without a clear path to employment. A job is dignity. Poverty is a state of mind, not just a state of being. We have to give these young people the hope that enables them to be a constructive part of our futures together, of driving economic growth and hope and optimism around the world. So we've got two paths. Give them the chance to power that future, or give them one where they will challenge our future because of migration, because of social unrest, and because of despondency driven by unemployment. Our strategic shift in agribusiness is aimed at unlocking that brighter future, that path to the future to power our possibilities as a world interconnected, delivering quality of life and delivering jobs and the dignity that the jobs bring. Quality of life improves as agricultural productivity increases. Climate-smart production practices mean fewer emissions, cleaner air. Higher incomes leads to investments in freshwater infrastructure. Diets improve, children grow up healthier, they're better able to make the most of their education and their opportunities. Healthier communities are way more resilient. For young people, the rise of a thriving agricultural industry brings the promise of a better life. With more jobs in rural areas and higher incomes, they no longer face the same limitations as their forefathers and their parents.